Ever since Stannis went north, he's had trouble making friends. He sent out ravens demanding fealty, and only half the Umbers and the Karstarks bent the knee. And the Karstarks were fucking with him. And so Stannis went to the mountain clans and asked, "Will you be my friends?" And they agreed. Together they liberated Deepwood Moat and won over House Glover and House Mormont. However, Stannis discovered that the Karstarks were not loyal to him, so they're out. And so on the eve of battle, this is who the houses officially support. In red, we have the Mormonts, Glovers, and Mountain clans supporting Stannis. Half of the Umbers also support Stannis. The other half of the Umbers and all of the other houses of the north support Roose Bolton, except for House Reed, who have been hiding out the entire series. Now, House Reed is significant as Mage Mormont and Galbert Glover were sent there to find Howland Reed. This makes them the only two people who witnessed Robb's will who were not killed or captured at the Red Wedding. And so some people believe that there is a great northern conspiracy going on. That is, assuming Robb named Jon his heir in his will, and assuming that the Mormonts and the Glovers were able to spread this information to their houses, and assuming this information could get to the other Northerners, the North might be conspiring to put Jon on the throne. Some even theorize that Edmure Tully could spread this information to the Riverlands as well. However, Robb's will was created because he thought his siblings were either dead or married to Lannisters. Working to put Jon on the throne ahead of his siblings would work against the spirit of the will, and after the Red Wedding it's likely that the Freys have the will itself. The word of Galbert Glover and Mage Mormont might be good enough for their houses, but may not be good enough for the entire North. And as for the Riverlands, they don't have any reason to support Jon. He doesn't have any Tully blood, and Northerners abused the Riverlands quite a bit during the War of the Five Kings. And one would think if there were a conspiracy to put Jon on the throne, that someone would bother telling Jon. But there is one more thing that shows that there's no Northern conspiracy for Jon. The fact that Robb didn't leave the North to him. Let's go back to the events surrounding Robb's decision on choosing an heir. Robb asks Catelyn who should follow him. Catelyn has a few suggestions of distant relatives in the Vale. But Robb seems to have two criteria for choosing an heir. One, that they're a Stark, and two, that they know Winterfell. These criteria cut down who he can choose quite a bit. The Cerwyns certainly know Winterfell, but aren't Starks. The Karstarks may be Starks, but don't really know Winterfell very well. It seems like Jon is the only choice. He's no Stark, but he can be made a Stark by Robb. But if Jon is the only choice, why does Robb think long and hard about the decision? There must be someone else out there who is just as good as Jon. And even though Robb doesn't need Catelyn's approval, he goes out of his way to have an argument with her about it. Why? What's her role in the whole decision-making process? Catelyn eventually refers to the entire situation as a trap, but that doesn't quite make sense if it were Jon. Telling Catelyn that he's going to pick Jon and then picking Jon would not be a trap. Threatening Catelyn that he's going to pick Jon and then choosing someone else would be a trap. So who could this person be? Well, they have to be a Stark, they have to know Winterfell, and the person needs to need Catelyn's approval. There's only one person out there that fits this description, and that person is Catelyn. Catelyn has been made a Stark, and she's the only person that can rally both the Riverlands and the North. And yes, she's a woman, which is why Mage Mormont in the same chapter has a conversation with her about how strong women are thrust into leadership positions. And I do think it's interesting that Melisandre, in response to the Red Wedding, says that false kings will rise to take the crowns of those who died. Catelyn's no king, but she did rise from the dead and ended up with Robb's crown. But all of this talk about Robb's will is really a distraction. Robb's siblings are alive, and 4 of them have both Tully and Stark blood, which makes them a much better choice than a bastard in the Night's Watch or a zombie. Most importantly, the word is out that Rickon Stark is alive, and people are definitely conspiring to make him either King of the North or Lord of Winterfell. Keep in mind, when Bran is heading north, he runs into a mountain clan called the Littles. The Littles are big gossipers. They know events happening beyond the Wall and with the Boltons. So the mountain clans have likely deduced that Rickon is still alive, and there's a good chance that they spread this information to the Mormonts and the Glovers. But weirdly, no one has told Stannis. What's also weird is that one of the mountain clan members, a Flint, runs off with a mule during Stannis' march. Where did he go? To find the Umbers? To find the Risewell scouts? To find Roose Bolton scouts? Meanwhile, House Manderly has also figured out that Rickon is alive because they have found Wex. Wex was Theon's squire, and much like Varys' little birds, he's mute, literate, and very good at spying. He for some reason decides to follow Rickon to see where he's going, and for some reason ends up in White Harbor in the custody of Manderly. And so the Manderleys have promised Davos that they'll support Stannis if he goes to Skagos and brings back Rickon Stark. So there's definitely a Manderley conspiracy going on to make Rickon the Lord of Winterfell. The Manderleys are the most outspoken against the Freys, and they even probably killed 3 Freys and baked them into giant pies for everyone to eat. But we know this conspiracy goes a little further than the Manderleys. We know back in A Clash of Kings that the Manderleys and the Umbers were ordered to build ships together. And we know Mance Rayder went looking for Arya around Long Lake, which is in Umber territory. And the next time we run into Mance, he's at Winterfell, but he's only able to get in because Manderley didn't bring a singer. After Theon's escape, he plops right in front of Mors Umber, who seems to be expecting him. So it's almost certain that Mors Umber on the outside of Winterfell is part of the Manderley conspiracy. But what about the Umbers on the inside of Winterfell? Well, Theon says something very interesting to Stannis about the Umbers. He says all of the Umbers on the inside of Winterfell with Hothar Umber are old men, while all of the Umbers on the outside of Winterfell with Mors Umber are green boys. Sending all of the old men to Hothar Umber and all of the young men to Mors Umber shows a great deal of coordination. So it seems that the Umbers are working in concert, with the old men having one mission and the green boys having a different mission. Now one would expect that the old men would have the more dangerous mission. Are they planning something bold inside Winterfell? But Theon says something else that's very interesting to Stannis. He says all the real men died with Greatjon at the Red Wedding. This is actually false. Theon forgets that there's another Umber army out there. In A Clash of Kings, Theon specifically hears reports of Umbers gathering beyond the last river, and then is very surprised when no Umbers show up to rout him from Winterfell. It sounds like the Umbers are unified, stronger than people think, and well positioned inside and outside Winterfell. That's good news for Stannis, right? Well, Jon specifically tells Stannis that he should not trust Mors Umber. Mors Umber fails to mention the Manderley conspiracy or his hidden forces to Stannis. Additionally, there's evidence that Rickon Stark has returned on the scene, and Mors Umber has failed to tell Stannis about this either. What do I mean? Well, Lady Dustin takes Theon down to the crypts of Winterfell and makes note that a number of swords are missing from the tombs. Of course, these swords are missing because Bran, Rickon, Asha, and Hodor took them. So had Lady Dustin actually heard a story about Rickon's return with a crypt sword, she somewhat verifies the story by finding missing swords in the crypts. Now when I say that Rickon has returned on the scene, I don't mean he's actually at Winterfell. That would be ridiculously dangerous and foolish. Still, the lords are going to need some verification that Rickon is still alive, so Asha and those swords might be a good substitute. Which brings us back to Mors Umber. When he runs into fake Arya, he asks her, who is the cook in Winterfell, and who is the blacksmith in Winterfell? Now Mors Umber isn't from Winterfell, so he shouldn't really know who these people are, but he claims he knows the smith because he says he was really good at his job, and he claims he knows the cook because the last time in Winterfell he had a great steak and kidney pie. Of course, the last time Mors was in Winterfell was the Harvest Festival, and steak and kidney pie wasn't on the menu. The pie was made of venison. So Mors seems to be lying, and for some reason knows about 2 men in Winterfell. Why these 2 men? Well, these 2 men have a special connection to Asha. Asha was banging the cook of Winterfell, and the sword she took was Ned's, meaning it was crafted by Mikken, the blacksmith of Winterfell. The sword even has Mikken's mark. So it seems Mors Umber has been chatting with Asha, knows Rickon is alive, and has failed to tell Stannis about this. Now Lady Dustin seems to catch wind of Rickon's survival after the return of 2 of Roose Bolton's scouts, so either Mors Umber told them about the missing swords, or the missing Flint told them about the missing swords. Still, even though the Umbers don't seem particularly loyal, the return of Rickon means Davos was successful on Skagos. So, who knows, maybe he even brought back some Skagosi. But Mors Umber's questions for Jane Poole show us something else. It shows us that either he doesn't know that Arya is a fake, or he isn't sure that Arya is a fake. This is a bit odd, as House Manderley has met Arya a couple times in White Harbor. They know Arya is a fake, but apparently have not communicated this to House Umber. So although there are a lot of different forces conspiring against the Boltons, there's a lot of withheld information and a lot of mistrust among them. But are the Boltons faring any better? And what about the Risewells, the Dustins, the Serwins, the Hornwoods, the Tallhearts, and the 2 different Flints? Well, we'll talk about them in part 2.